So this video is really more because it's kind of a reply to a couple comments I got when I was making fun of, kind of blaming Trump supporters. There was one particular person, he said he was from Alaska, but he's not from Alaska, dude. It's like, if you're gonna lie, lie. Yeah, show your face. But that's not the point. The point was, he was talking about that, I was liberal. I kind of laughed at that because it's like, well, not really. I wanted to explain, you know, part of the reason why, California GOP has no future. Back when I had, a life and I didn't get sick and I, was saving up to buy a house. This was early 20s. And I was, I've always, once I graduated college, I pretty much was working in city government, and I was working, eventually I worked like small amount of time at federal government. But during that time, working in city government, I got to meet a lot of the GOP leaders in San Bernardino County. And I also got to know a lot of the ones in Riverside County where I live now. I could tell you, back early 2010s, mid 2010s, the writing was on the wall that, the GOP couldn't win. I'm not a religious person, At that time, I still believe in God. Now I don't. I remember the way they were, during the meetings, during these GOP meetings that they hold in Ontario. The way they were, to me, government should be government. It shouldn't be anything with religion. And it was pretty much, kind of like Baptists. Like out in this area, a lot of the mega churches, they're the new age Christianity where all they care about is money, all they talk about money. Just the way they were acting, towards people of religion in general who weren't Christian and didn't go to these mega churches out, in San Bernardino County. One of the biggest ones is Sandals, and it's Water Life. They have like 20,000 people going to a church service. At least Water Life, unlike Sandals and a couple of other ones, they at least give some of the money to the homeless. But, most of them don't. The way they were acting, they were praying. I was like, this is political meeting. Why are you praying? They were trying to insert, religious beliefs, bad-mouthing people who were Muslim. And I was like, well, they could be Muslim, they could be Jewish, they could be whatever. I never really was a fan in my 20s of religion at all. But, I'm not going to go chastise a person who believes in God. Even today, I don't believe in God. It makes me happy, and I kind of have a bit of pride when I see a person that's really religious and really, into God. Because if that's their belief, that's ultimately what they believe in. And I'm not going to tell them, like, you can't believe in God just because I even prayed to the devil and my health continued to decline. It was just during those meetings, just seeing the way they were acting, just in general, it kind of pissed me off. If you drive around Temecula, a lot of the houses, they have HOA parks. There's no city parks. They're privatized parks. One of the biggest complaints they have out here is the kids playing at Target. And I'm like, well, there's no park. They're like, well, they HOA parks, right? Well, when these GOP members that I knew started pushing for these homes, they flat out said they had to be Spanish-style homes. So a Spanish-style home in California, it's that. The reason I bring up the homes has to do because why should a person, if remember, conservatives always, particularly California GOP, is always saying people have the freedom to live anywhere, do whatever they want. So why does every city council member in Inland Empire, where I live, who's conservative, because most city councils across this region are conservative, why do they tell a developer, no, you can't build a house unless it has an HOA? Because their main concern isn't a person being neighborly. It's property value. They want the houses to look the same, but they claim to be about freedom. It's not the only thing they do. They constantly try to cut safety nets. I'm going to be honest, I've used a safety net because I ended up in the ICU several times. And what bothers me is you're telling people, no, you can't use, Medicaid. You can't use food stamps if you need them. That time, I remember when I was going to those meetings, it bothered me because it was like, well, people need safety net. They were okay. The California GOP is okay with welfare. They act like they're not. They really are. Because everywhere around here in the Inland Empire, they have given nothing but subsidies to Amazon. Amazon is not going to pay taxes in any of the warehouses that they have all around the Inland Empire for 25 years. because they gave them a break for 25 years. That's a subsidy. And this is a party that constantly says no welfare, but it seems the welfare is okay. And then I remember at the time, it was, during the meetings, one of the guys who used to go to the meetings was one of their big funders. And it was one of the colonies guys. Massive scandal in San Bernardino County. Ended up costing the county $100 million. The GOP in the county decided to give the land without bid, and they decided to give it on cheap. So someone ended up suing. The DA got involved. DA got eventually kicked out because he was an idiot. They continued to do this. There was a portion of property over here near Riverside. It was flood control property. No bid again. So when I used to work in city government, before I got sick, I was doing business analyst for the police department in the city I used to work in. Occasionally, you would have to talk with neighboring agencies. One of them was Riverside County. Who's running for governor? Oh, the sheriff is running for governor. The reason I bring it up is a lot of these guys, mostly in the sheriff, they're all Republican. They always talk about, law and order, but they don't follow through. The idiot sheriff of Riverside County decided to essentially steal all the ballots. He went out to Moreno Valley, where the register office is at, and take all the ballots, and then sign a warrant. The problem is, if you claim to be law and order, which a lot of these Republicans do, and it's the reason why they can't win, there's a thing in every county in California called the grand jury. If you really believe about law and order and you claim to be conservative, why the hell did you not just go and present your case to the grand jury? Most of the people who serve in the grand jury are conservative in this county of Riverside and in the county of San Bernardino. He knows there's nothing wrong with those ballots, because if he really did believe, he would have gone to the grand jury. He would have presented his case, and they would have given a warrant to investigate, and they themselves would investigate to see what was wrong with the county registrar. And this is a guy who wants to run for governor. He's not going to win. Who said he supports a felon. Remember, law and order. And this stupid, idiotic attitude that they do here in the Inland Empire, the reason they can't win. Because if you go look at the amount of people who are deregistering the Republican Party and registering nonpartisan independent, it's almost 1-to-1. If you don't see an issue with what Chad Bianco is doing by constantly saying they're rigging elections, no one in the right mind who is conservative is going to go out and vote in person or via mail. Because what's the point of voting if it's rigged? And this is what I find so stupid, because this is their policy. And they're always complaining. It's like, so no, they don't. And then when they get pissed off, they sabotage the Republican Party. Out here, there used to be a guy, I can't remember his name. I think his name was Paul Chabot. He's in Texas now, running GOP in Texas. That asshole, no one in the Republican Party, who were moderate members at the time, no one liked him. He didn't win an election. He purposely sabotaged the seat, and they lost it to a Democrat, who's the third most powerful Democrat. I remember the ads. When I was going to those meetings. I also remember the ads prior to me going to those meetings. Chabot was posting Aguilar. And I was like, well, why the hell are you doing that? That's stupid. And then when he lost the seat, the Republican candidate for the district, he ran against them, so they would lose. It's stupid stuff like this why the GOP can't win, because they're not moderate. And just to show you, for example, when I talked about my mentor at the time was Janice Rutherford, the county supervisor, Republican. Recently, she quit the Republican Party. Everyone was expecting her to run for a seat in the House of Representatives. She quit because the Republican Party is so damn toxic that even a moderate who's conservative and was a nurse decided that it wasn't worth her time to run in the GOP. And this is the case with every moderate Republican. I have not seen a brodozer with the Trump flag since the gas went up. The thing I want to point out is those brodozers are the Republican Party. Diesel at gas station, I don't use diesel. I use a car. But diesel out here is $8 now. Where are all these, moderate Republicans calling out the stupidity of the fat Cheeto? No one's saying anything. Instead, they're supporting them. And you go purposely screw them. They're not going to vote for you, At some point, if there's any Republican left that has sway, they're going to have to realize, one, you're going to have to try to keep people like me, like they were trying to push me back then to run for office. but you're gonna have to try to keep people without stupid positions. You take positions because the president's a pedophile. Let's be honest, he's effing a pedophile. He's protecting pedophiles, so he starts a war to protect his pedophile. No one calls him out. Anyone in the Republican Party who wants to be great would throw Trump under the bus. Let's be honest. If they really cared about this country, they would throw Trump under the bus because it's hurting them. Long term, California, GOP is dead. Completely dead. The ones that actually do care, half of them run away. They literally leave the state. They either go to Texas or they go to Florida. Everything's woke. That's all they can say is woke. It's like, if you're gonna go take these extremist views on religion, safety nets, which is a conservative value, and for Christians, love thy neighbor, letting them do what they do is a conservative value. Instead, they don't. When they're complaining about they can't win California because California's woke, it's not that California's woke. Because I've heard people who voted, in the store at Stater Brothers, straight out say they voted for the Democrat even though they knew the policies were crap because the Republican was worse. Think about that. If people are literally saying they're going to vote for a person who wants to trans kids because the Republican guy is worse, that should be a big, flashing light for Cawthron, which I think he's still the San Bernardino County GOP, to realize the crap you have on the website is not going to bring anyone in. Remember, they make these HOAs because they care about property value. That's all they care about. Property value, and everyone's house look the same. Doesn't sound conservative. That park, on Nicolas, it's near AM/PM. That park's an HOA park. The other side of the street, not an HOA. At least that track is not an HOA. The one right next to Pirate Park. It's designed like a park. That park, if a kid crosses over to play with his friend at the HOA park, the security guard kicks him out. That Pirate Park's always has people there. So where does the kid go? They go hang out at Target. Conservatives say they're family men, but then they end up hiring security guards for their HOA to kick a kid out because a kid wants to play with the friend who lives in the HOA. Well, since they can't play, the park's full. Where do they go? Target. What do they do when they get to Target? They get their bikes taken away. That's the Southern California conservative.